Okay, so now we're moving on to the second emotion, which is nicknamed actor. Um, Although the owner of the second emotion is called an actor, it should be clarified that the film actor is primarily meant. Particular emphasis is placed on cinema because theater, due to the significant distance between the viewer and the stage, even with a realistic normative transfer of feelings, requires some overkill, a boost of expression, i.e., first emotions. It's a different matter in cinema, where medium and close ups not only allow, but require subtle, complex, normative psychological play. It is here, like nowhere else, that the talent of the second emotion can manifest itself, the main feature of which is a strict norm in the expression of experiences. No matter in what tone the actor expresses his feelings, whether high or low, he will always be adequate to the situation. Will always go from fact to emotion, and not vice versa, as a romantic usually does. Previously, there was already an episode with an actress who had to film 20 takes in one day, and each time tears appeared in her eyes at the moment when necessary, and there were as many of them as needed. So, although in this case we were talking about a great actress, the ability of a constant, adequate emotional reaction in itself is not a talent, but a natural property of the second emotion. I myself have more than once had the opportunity to watch with envy an actor when, at the funerals of people unfamiliar to him or even unlikable, he, not being a professional actor and even on the contrary, a housewife, took on the role of a tuning fork of emotions, and it was always great. Each moment of the sad ritual under his leadership was emotionally played out exactly in the measure and tone appropriate to the occasion. Um, yeah, that's so he's getting into the 2E description, but I want to circle back to 1E and more broadly the results emotion functions, which is 1E and 4E. I kind of have a saying um, just to very quickly explain or to illustrate results emotion, which is that they laugh at funerals. Now, the reason why people laugh at funerals is often because there's like a giddiness that happens where people are kind of nervous. And sometimes, funerals are fun occasions because the person passed in like a good way and people are, kind of remembering all um, the fun times they had with that person, especially again, if they pass like as an old person in their sleep or something. There's no occasion to really be like deeply grieving. Uh, so yeah, people can laugh at funerals normally, but it's just the type of person who's like out of step with the norm, out of step with the procedural emotions. That's more results emotions, right? Because they're independent. Like someone who's emotionally like confident and who's only acting in terms of their own authentic feelings, they might be out of step with the emotional crowd out of like their strength, right? Their excess of emotion, marching to the beat of their own drum. Whereas the fourth emotion, they're kind of indifferent, right? They're emotionally indifferent, and they're a little bit goofy and callous for E. So that's kind of I just wanted to riff on that example he gave of like the funeral. Like, yes, 2E, they try to always be appropriate to the emotions, to the crowd or to the occasion, you could say. Okay. So the actor has impeccable command of the technique of emotional transformation. It is not his feelings that control him, but he his feelings. The artist Korovin, once backstage with, I guess, Chaliapin. I'm not sure how to pronounce many of these names, but during a performance of Boris Godunov, later said, Chaliapin, standing next to me, talked to a ballet dancer. Lord, if I weren't married, you are so beautiful. But it's all the same, my dear. Then the director opened the door, and Chaliapin, instantly taking on the appearance of a doomed king, stepped through the door with the words, Cheer mine, child. I'm not your villain. There was tragedy in his voice. I was surprised by his experience and this incredible self confidence. He was amazing. Okay, so basically, there, um, there's this actor and he's talking to this ballet dancer and he's kind of in like a good mood. Um, and then the director opened the door and the actor instantly became his character. He instantly assumed the tragic demeanor of the doomed king, right? Okay. Uh, do, do, do. Frankly, I am familiar with the feeling experienced by Korovin at the site of Chaliapin's metamorphosis. Having worked in various theaters for a long time, I was never able to get used to the literally terrifying ability of big actors, meaning, and he's putting in parentheses the actors, meaning second emotion types, to change their feelings like gloves, transforming almost instantly and with impeccable accuracy. Now, notice here he's kind of gone back on his analogy because he's talking about stage actors who he kind of said is more akin to first emotion, but there, of course, are plenty of stage actors who are second emotion. So that's just a tidbit there. So a huge advantage of the second emotion is a constant desire to enrich your palette. All shades of emotional dynamics are played naturally and with full dedication by the actor, from piano pianissimo, extremely quiet, to fortissimo, extremely loud, and this flexing of emotional muscles brings him nothing but pleasure. For clarity, I will give an example from the field of a phenomenon so beloved by the masses as pop music. There are singers and groups who clearly gravitate towards a rather monotonous performance that is extreme in tone and character, like the Rolling Stones. Such performance, although the most catchy and passionate, soon becomes boring and causes belching due to monotony and emotional tyranny, first emotion. And there are other singers and groups who are fluent in the entire range of moods, at whose constants killer rock and roll is easily replaced by soulful ballads. Elvis Presley, the Beatles. In this case, the singer enjoys not only the ability to shape the emotional structure of listeners, but also the opportunity to lead them from one state to another, demonstrating all the richness and diversity of his feelings shared with the crowd. The ability to quickly change moods is valued here at least no less than the power of influence. This is the second emotion. What is, of course, common to all actors, and again, when he's saying actors, he means second emotion, um, both big and small, is the ability and desire to be the soul of any social formation, family, company, community, enterprise, and even the state. Yes, I will just say that is a good way to think about 2E, is that they're trying to become the soul of the group. Because, remember, emotion is essentially it's like classical part of the psyche would be the soul, logic, mind, volition or will, spirit, and then physics is the body. So the second position, or the second function, is all about the group. It's self-positive, it's others positive, process oriented. Okay, it's normative, right? So the soul of the group. That's what 2E tend to be like. Um, yeah, and they're not only the soul is in like um, taking in the group emotions and embodying, and expressing that, but also there's a strength to it as well. They're pushing something out. They're pushing an emotional energy out to the group. So it's bidirectional, which is it's processing. Okay. In a broad sense, the second emotion is the director. By director, I mean both the director himself and the speaker, lead singer, preacher, mourner, toastmaster. In a word, any person who shapes the emotional atmosphere of the sphere of gatherings, meetings, celebrations, both joyful and sad. Which celebrations, joyful or sad, are preferable for the actor are determined not by emotion, but by physics, about which more later. But of course, the unifying principle of all carriers of the second emotion lies in a burning, never satiated appetite for all kinds of artistic and near artistic products. The range here is enormous, from memorizing thousands of sacred texts to quite serious collecting of anecdotes, matches, and table jokes, a matter of taste and education. But the principle is the same. the desire and opportunity, thanks to the processing of artistic information, to be the soul of society. Very much so. I would like to emphasize the word society in the last phrase, because it is not enough for an actor to experience the whole gamut of human experiences. The second emotion, if the reader remembers, is processional. Therefore, an indispensable condition for the completeness of its implementation is the presence of a viewer, who, although not very competently, but more accurately, should be called an empathizer. This thirst of the actor to find an audience can be so passionate and irresistible that it leads to funny things. So, outlining the biography of the most cruel Roman Emperor Caligula, the historian told the following episode. One day after midnight, Caligula summoned 3 senators of consular rank to the palace and seated them on the stage. Trembling in anticipation of the worst, meaning they were trembling, and then suddenly ran out to them to the sounds of flutes and rattles, in a woman's veil and tunic to the toes, danced a dance and left. He could not dance just for himself. The emperor's thirst to share his invented dance with the audience was so great that he was unable to wait for the morning or a special occasion. An order followed, as a result of which the senators had more gray hair, and Caligula got rid of the painful feeling of the impossibility of fully realizing the best side of his nature. He could not dance just for himself. The emperor's thirst to share his invented... Okay, so I think it starts... I think it does like the repeating thing again. Let me see if I can find where this... The example with Caligula is such that one might get the impression the actor is characterized by emotional dictatorship, but this is not true. If one of the senators decided to dance together with the emperor and tried to express his state in the dance, Caligula's subtle soul, I am sure, would have responded to the trembling of the senator's heart. In the process of waltzing, they would come to some kind of emotional consensus, since the second emotion is characterized not only by strength and self-confidence, but also by a flexible, sensitive spirit of empathy. Yeah, I agree. That's a pretty good example. 2Es like to draw emotion out of people. They like to kind of flirt with emotion. And they like when people are become emotionally engaged and there's sort of this like group, like sharing of emotion, group therapy. That's very 2E. However, jokes aside, the reality is that if an actor is not engaged in the sphere of serving the senses, religious, mystical, artistic, entertaining, society will place little value on his talent. The story of Emperor Caligula looks like a curiosity precisely because we were talking about an emperor. If it had been an opera prima donna in his place, who had gotten her manager out of bed to sing him a new aria, no one would have considered it a curiosity. Human life is such a thing that physics, will, or at worst, logic, are more valued in it, but not emotion. Well, okay. I guess he has a low opinion of logic, but moreover, the owner of the second emotion sometimes has to feel disgust and even hostility towards himself in everyday life. This happens because the second function is the best side of human nature, and if it is rarely demanded by society, then a person, willy-nilly, turns out to be turned towards others by the rest. Not to say bad, but not the best. Okay, so he's trying to say like they turn out not the bad side, but not the best side of himself. Okay, if they aren't allowed to, if the second position isn't valued by the society they find themselves in. The second emotion has a particularly hard time. Its ability to squander the treasure of its feelings is worth little in our routine existence. And the revival that the second emotion usually brings to the dry business of life is annoying, or at least perceived as a matter of course. An obvious low-value gift, but in vain, even when the actor is lazy. And the translation, I think, might have cut off there. However, I was a little hasty with my clumsy attempts to protect the second emotion from outside attacks. She is quite capable of taking care of herself. Anyone who tried to present any bills to the actor to interfere with his claims usually very soon began to regret his idea. So I think he means it's a metaphor, meaning like present any bills, like any like demands to the actor to interfere with his claims to maybe like free expression, I'm guessing. Because minus the second logic, only the second emotion so masterfully masters the art of shaving off to seal, bark, etc., Language is a native natural element for the second emotion, and woe to the one who chooses it as the battlefield with the actor. Precision of words, precision of expression is not a distant goal, but the normal state of an actor, regardless of cultural level. Okay, so they're very good with, they're wise and precise with their words. They can be witty, not necessarily in a logical wit, but in an emotional wit, in kind of like changing the mood and you know getting people to feel a certain way about a person, like a rude interlocutor or something. Okay. And when Gogol, remembering the obscene nickname of one of the heroes of Dead Souls and comparing the Russian language with other European languages in this regard, wrote that there is no word that would be so sweeping, smart, so bursting out from under the very heart, would seethe and vibrate so vividly like an aptly spoken Russian word. He did not flatter the Russian people at all, but only stated the predominance of the second emotion among them. Right, because he believes that like Russia, the type of like the Russian culture is first physics, second emotion, and I think third will and fourth logic. Um, Returning to the problem of the relationship of emotion to metaphor, it is necessary to note as a special sign that the second emotion does not really like it. Tolstoy spoke directly about his antipathy to metaphor, and this is understandable. Due to its inadequacy, any comparison is lame. Metaphor cannot be held in high esteem by the actor. He does not feel any special need for it even when he is in a poetry workshop, although, as they say, metaphor is the bread of poetry. Therefore, from the pen of the second emotion sometimes comes poems of that special kind that are called anatropic, literally without techniques. Examples of such poetry can be found in Lermontov, Yesenin, Akhmatova. The same thing happens in prose. The actor strives for the most accurate transfer of feelings and is ready for understatement of expression rather than hyperbolization. In order for the reader to visually imagine the standard prosaic expression of feelings in the second emotion, I will give an excerpt from the trilogy Childhood, Adolescence, Youth, Leo Tolstoy. Some kind of new for me, extremely strong and pleasant feeling suddenly penetrated my soul. The busy chirping of the birds swarming in this bush, the blackish fence wet from the snow melting on it, and most importantly, this fragrant damp air and the joyful sun spoke to me clearly about something new and beautiful, which although I cannot convey the way it was expressed to me, I'll try to convey it as I perceived it. Everything spoke to me about beauty, happiness, and virtue. Said that somehow, and then I think unfortunately the translation might cut off there. Or, excuse me. In general, I call the literary activity of the second emotion strong and processional, akinical. This homegrown neologism comes from akin, the Kyrgyz Kazakh title of folk singers. The canonical image of an akin is a man riding across the steppe on his rough horse with a dambra in his hands and singing everything he sees from sunrise to sunset. Such an akin, singing everything that came into view, seems to me to be an actor engaged in literature. The akinic approach leaves a special imprint on both the form and content of the creativity of the second emotion. Firstly, she has a clear craving for a large form, a novel, Tolstoy, Dumas, or a poem, Byron, and is generally distinguished by great artistic fertility, Lope de Vega. Secondly, there is something specific in the content of the actor's creativity. If, as we remember, the first emotion is the picker of the raisins of melodiousness, then for the second emotion there are no boundaries and hierarchies in the transfer of states. If only you knew from what rubbish poems grow without shame, like a yellow dandelion on a fence, like burdocks and quinoa. Akhmatova wrote, and in private conversation, already in prose, she outlined her understanding of the tasks of poetry. Poetry grows from such everyday sayings as, "Would you like some tea?" You need to make poetry out of them. Make poetry out of the phrase, "Would you like some tea?" This is what it means to be a classic akin. So that's it for second emotion.